Right. So then, first of all, I want to say a few words about why I think we need corpus-based typology. Then, with practical issues, because so that you also know how to do it, I should talk about available corpora, what kind of measures I think one can use, and what kind of methods. And then I'll illustrate and give you a couple of, to give you a flavor of corpus-based typology, I'll present a couple of case studies. Then, at the moment, if you are into typology, you probably have noticed that most data in typology are used from grammar, taken from grammar. So grammar mining, so to say. You've probably heard about this famous gram bank that has been recently launched by Leipzig. Or the already maybe a bit outdated World Atlas of Language Structures, which is still good, of course, but not so big as a gram bank. Then there are other databases like or to type, I don't know exactly how to pronounce, and many others. And then they just people experts read grammars, and then they okay, is this language SVO or SV or and so on. And that's fine, and it's of course practically feasible. But I also think that this approach should be complemented by corpora, because first it allows us for greater precision in encoding these variables, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Then also, if there is a lot of variation in the language and you don't really know how to classify it, then if you just use corpus measures, then you don't need to force your data into a Procrustean bed. Then this also helps you avoid data reduction looking at all kinds of linguistic phenomena, not only those like, verb-object order or position, noun order, is it postpositional, prepositional language, because then these are easy to look at, and but if a feature has a lot of variability, then it's kind of like how to classify these languages. And also, I think that corpora provide us with a window into language use, cognition, and communication. And there are also some practical reasons why I think it's good time to start using corpora for typological research, because there's been a lot of development of corpora of different languages and tools for processing them. So you can use, for example, different pipelines like Stanza, UDPipe, and also the number of corpora grows increasingly. There are more and more languages. For example, this fantastic initiative called Universal Dependencies. I don't know if you might have heard about this, but the idea is to create tree banks with all kind of logical synthetic annotation and lemmas, tokens, and everything so it should be as uniform as possible for as many languages as possible, and so it grows continuously. And or another example is parallel corpus, and I'll show you how I use it to research, which kind of makes sound a little bit strange. Why use the Bible for academic research? But actually, I think it can be pretty useful. And also, it covers very many languages, because the Bible has been translated in so many. Right. Now, how to do corpus-based typology. And so, first of all, what do we have? I often show this simple 2D typology of corpora with the horizontal dimension is kind of linguistic diversity, and the vertical dimension is text type diversity, and of course, both should be maximal if we want to do good stuff. But of course, we can start with traditional corpora like the BNC, the COCA, American English corpus, and many others. Many other languages have national corpora, and of course they're nice, they're representative, they're big, and but of course they cover only one corpus. Although you can use them for typological purposes as well, especially if you want to explain some language universals, and then you can actually take some national corpora. They don't have to be parallel or something. Then, on the other side is where with huge linguistic diversity is parallel Bible corpus, and as far as I know personally, I think it has the most languages. So that's if there are other corpora that beat the parallel model corpus, then please let me know in terms of linguistic diversity. And so there are many other corpora, like UD corpora, Opus, Latvish corpora, also freely available for quite a few languages, translations of Le Petit Prince, or my own corpus Party, or corpus of subtitles, a parallel one, Parasol, Multicast, Keep, or Keep Plus, and it's in the European corpus, and Cow corpora, it's a very large web-based corpora. Right. Of course, the ideal would be to have something like this. But I hope we'll get there some point. Right. As for also other things, important things that we would need, what about the annotation? If we look at post text, for example, not so many languages have them. So languages with very many, corpora with very many languages usually have no part of speech tags, and unfortunately, although there's still work in that direction. As for syntactic annotation, it's even fewer. It's UD corpora, multicast, and keep. They provide some UD corpora universal dependencies. Keep or Keep Plus also has universal dependencies. Multicast, they have their own annotation schema. So what is the subject, what is the object, and so on. And as for semantics, I'm also only aware of multicast that tries to describe semantics of arguments, animated and name or something like this. So maybe there are some updates at the moment, but when I looked into this, it was like this. So that's not much. So we, of course, that means a lot of work for us extracting different constructions that we're interested in. But now what can we, how can we describe languages? We can, for example, instead of labels like SOV, VSO, and so on, we can instead extract probabilities and proportions of different orders or different other phenomena. We can use some measures from information theory like entropy, mutual information, or vocabulary divergence, and many others, or Kolmogorov complexity and compression rates. All these things are pretty actually not so difficult to obtain as one might believe. There are some illustrations of these measures. So it's from our paper with Sabine Nambot-Dilipat and many other co-authors in linguistics. It's an open access, so you can look at this a little bit in greater detail than here. But so this graph on the left shows the proportion of subject-object order here, and so it just ranks languages whether they have so about 30 languages whether they have what is the portion of subject-object order in this corpora. So at the top are Indonesian, French, English, Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, Portuguese. I'm wondering, Estonian is here. It's not quite very subject dominant. By the way, it's only about full nominal phrases. And Lithuanian and Tamil and Hungarian Latvian are here, the four languages with high proportions of object first sentences. And the purpose of this graph is to show that it's not really a clear-cut. So this distinction, subject, whether they or maybe this feature, this variable, whether this a certain language has a subject first appearing before object, it's really a matter of gradients, and it's difficult to say where it's really subject first dominant order and where it's already kind of flexible word order. Difficult to make this decision. And the more you take, I guess, the messier it gets. And so the graph on the right shows the more complicated things a little bit. So the horizontal axis shows mutual information between role, subject and object, and case, whether case basically helps you determine whether it's subject or object. And so here it's English is of course at the on the left, and here with similar languages, and Lithuanian, Hungarian, Latvian, and Estonian are here. Well, you know that, if you see a form, you know whether it's subject or object, mostly. And So the vertical axis shows the entropy of subject and object order, and this means so the higher the entropy, the less certain you are whether it's subject that comes first or object comes first. Then I'll explain later how it can be computed. But again, Siena comparing Latvian and some Estonian, they have pretty and also Czech and Tamil. They have pretty high entropy. That means there's a lot of variability. And English, Indonesian, Swedish, Danish, French, they have low variability here. And what we see is that there is a nice correlation between case information and word order entropy, and it's observed mostly on the entire range of these languages. So, for example, Russian is somewhere in the middle, and because it has some variability in the word order, and it also has case, but its case maybe it's not so informative as Lithuanian. Lithuanian has this most ancient nominal morphology in the European languages, and so it's a little bit maybe so in Russian there's something like differential case marking. So it's mostly, for example, masculine nouns, only animate masculine nouns have distinction between subject and object, nominative and accusative. So basically, that's the purpose. There's a lot of things happening in between, and so these gradients should be taken into account. Then, so of course, there are many challenges and methodological issues. For example, so do we need a large corpus? Do we need large sample sizes? And so we also explore that in our paper. So this is work by Mark Alessandro, and who is also called in this paper. And so he wanted to explore how many sentences, clauses you need to investigate word order entropy, and when does this stabilize, and when we don't get reliable assessment measures. So his experiments show that after about 500 sentences, so this kind of evens out, and we get more or less reliable estimates out of entropy. So it's based on total languages. So there is some hope that you don't need millions of tokens and examples to do this. So another thing, of course, the challenge is how much we can rely on annotation of corpora, and especially automatic annotation, because then you might be excited to apply different pipelines and automatic tools and annotate a corpus and then get everything for free. But then, of course, there are many issues with this, and it's not 100%. It's never 100% correct. But there are still, I think, reasons to be cautiously optimistic about this enterprise, because at least there's a little case study of nominal dependencies, like determine the position, determine a case marker or a position, and adjective and attributive clauses with regard to the noun. And so that's something that Luigi Talamo and Marita Keck looked at, and so it's so. They looked at a number of languages, from Welsh to Danish, and so they're Indo-European. And actually, they compared the word order entropy with regard to these dependencies in the universal dependencies gold standard training corpora, and in automatically annotated data. They just applied so these models to their data. And so they saw that mostly there is no big difference, at least for some dependencies occasionally, but mostly these kind of measures overlap or are similar. And finally, of course, one thing I want to warn you about when you do, if you want to start doing typological research based on corpus data or any kind of typological research. Well, it's well known to typologists, this problem, but maybe not so well known to people outside. And the problem is that when you want to have perform some inferential statistics, for example, run a regression model on your data with many languages, usually, especially if you use corpus data, the data points, the languages are not independent. So usually they come mostly from Indo-European languages, and also we have many Slavic, Romance, Germanic languages, and some others, and also mostly from Europe or Eurasia. And so, of course, this makes them not independent. And so the similarities that we observe, they can be due to genealogical relations and language context. And in order to, so you can't just perform a correlation analysis and take a list of languages in universal dependencies corpora and then have some measures and compute correlations. It won't go because then there will be if you use mixed models, then you know what I'm talking about. And then, so some solutions, of course, mixed models. Then you can add these genealogical relations and like genus or families as random effects. You can even better use a whole genealogical trees as random effects. It's also possible, and that's what people do usually, or geographic distances as random effects. So you can also have this matrix there as a random effect, basically. Or a simpler version, you can just sample one for genus or family area. Right. Okay. Now let me illustrate this. With some research questions. I hope it's fun. And first of all, what can we do? We can do many things with corpora if we are interested in crossing research. Very simple thing is to compare semantic and pragmatic functions of many related constructions, and we can also find dimensions of variation. So the second one, we can of course classify languages based on aggregate indices derived from corpora, and we test and find linguistic generalizations. And I'll show you some brief illustrations of those tasks. So let's start with semantic pragmatic functions of constructions that we want to compare. So I worked a lot on positives, and you might have heard about this, but maybe it still will be interesting. So probably about causative continuum. So there's different causative constructions, starting with lexical and to morphological and analytical periphrastic causatives. Lexical causatives are causatives where the cause and effect are both expressed in one word, or better, one morpheme, like kill or break. And morphological causatives are where there is a special morpheme that makes kind of this lexical verb causative. And like in Turkish, kill from die. And in analytic, there are special words that expresses some kind of very abstract cause, like cause X to die or make X disappear. So let's look at European causatives and compare. So some examples in English: don't make me cry, let my people go, you're forcing me to be the voice of reason, or 6 careers that allow you to travel around the world. So it's very, very broad sense of causative. So it can be permissive, it can be forceful, it can be anything. Right. And so I worked a lot with these my party corpus, and so it's always fun to look at different films, and I guess I know now them by heart. And so my favorite is Avatar, because with so many fans that translated it into many languages. Then it's Amélie. Hope you know this cute movie. Then not so cute, La Vita e Bella. It's with Roberto Benigni. Then German, Das Leben der Anderen. Then Twilight, The Tourist, and Il Labirinto del Fauno. So very, very different movies. But it kind of helps to include very many diverse causative situations. And I found translations in 18 European languages, and in 15 Indo-European and 3 Ugric languages, including Estonian, and also Finnish and Hungarian, of course. And so I found almost 400 causative contexts where at least one language used an analytic causative here. And so then I performed some multiplication scaling, and I'll show you. But I wanted here to focus only on just methodological part on Romance analytic causatives, and probably if you studied some of these languages, it's in Italian it's fare plus infinitive, in French it's faire. Then in Spanish it's hacer plus infinitive. There can also be a nominal phrase. Then in Portuguese it's fazer, and they can also have fancy things like inflected infinitives. And in Romanian it's apace, ser, and then subjective form. That's Romanian languages. They are the Romanian language is part of the Balkan Sprachbund, and they don't like the infinitive. They use something else there. So here they use subjunctive. Okay, and then so this is a map. So the points are actually the context where at least one language of these 18 used an analytic causative, and then this. It's of course very difficult to interpret what exactly it means, but basically, if you look at this map, and the distance between the points, it shows how many languages agreed use the same causative form, the same causative construction, and then we apply kind of isomorphism principle and say, okay, if these things are expressed by similar forms, that also means that so probably they are semantically, conceptually similar. Right. And and the dimensions would be something like this. It's not really very, I think it would be the fairest. Yeah, I hope you can see, my this pointer. And so I would start with this top right corner, and here we would have something really, some strong causation, like force for somebody to do something. Then there is kind of a normal causation, which is usually expressed by make causatives in English. And then here we already, in this corner, we have a lot of letting, and here at the top it's allow and permit. So it's basically a very, very weak causation with very low control over what impact of the causa here, and then it increases in kind of U shape, like you often find it in this pattern in multidimensional scaling, and so here it's very strong. It's force. And so, let's look at Romanian now. So this graph shows the most likely area where this Romanian analytic causative is going to be used. And then it's this area and this area. So it means like it's strictly normal causative, and there's some forceful causation there. And then look at Portuguese. It's already kind of more in this normal make causation. Then Spanish the same. Then French, it's already moves towards Latin. There are some contexts where Latin is also expressed. So causation becomes weaker and weaker. So I think because it's already very, very semantically bleached causative, it doesn't more like a transitivity enhancing device. And then Italian. So that expresses a lot of it's because there are so many examples, like let me see that, or let me do that, and that's also so kind of the distinction between making and letting is blurred. So and also this reflected in the frequencies in Italian and French. So these are really frequent causatives constructions, and then in Romanian they are much less frequent. So this is how you can compare these and visualize the differences. But what will happen if we take more diverse languages? And I want to show you how we can get to dimensions of variation here. So I also took, again, some subtitles from the party covers, and this time I had more interesting languages like English, French, Indonesian, Mandarin, Chinese, Russian, Thai, Turkish, Vietnamese. More interesting because they're more diverse. And so then I selected some events using very broad definition again, and also annotated them types manually based on the English situation. So these are the films now. Avatar, Black Swan, Frozen, and Twilight. Again, trying to be as diverse as possible. But now these are English originally. So this is an example from Avatar. Like the originalists don't shoot, you piss him off, and then you remember that Jack Sully shoots at some. So on this planet Pandora shoots at some creature that appears from the forest. That's not a good idea, of course. So and then translation in French. It's a lexical positive to piss off somebody. Then in Turkish, it's a morphological positive, become angry, and then add a suffix, and it's now make angry. And in Vietnamese, there's a positive, analytic positive similar to make in English with a lam verb like to make or do. And then so I can extracted all these translations and coded them for like, is it the lexical positive, morphological positive, or analytic positive, and so on. So I try to get some kind of a semantic map of causation in these 10 languages. And so this is the result like, and again, it's difficult to interpret. So these kind of space, and so then the best solution was the 3 dimensions. So this is the first and second dimension, and this is the second and third dimension. And then I interpret the dimension by having annotated these examples into different features. Features like whether it's intentional, whether it's forceful, whether it's direct or not, whether the causation controls what happens or not, and so on. From typological literature, if you're into positives, you should know all this probably. And that what was interesting is that both the first and the second dimension that they correlated mostly with a distinction between factative and permissive, like making or letting, basically. So that was really, really weird. And so, and the third dimension was also whether it's about helping or not. That's really strange. And so there's some examples. So this is the red dots. So the same first and second dimension. So the red dots show the factative, like making, and the blue dots show the permissive causation, letting. And so there's some examples, and the ground put forth the growing things. It's from Noah, I think, or it's from Black Swan. Let me make this very important announcement. So then to give you an idea. And now you made him mad here. And so then I'll just keep the specific constructions. Maybe you can also plot them here in order to compare this. And this is the second and the third dimension. And the third dimension, then there is just one example. There are only a kind of bunch of points here with helping, where English uses the verb help. They need a guy to help choose the music. So you see that it's only these 2 things, so that's not really very rich. And of course, that's not what you expect when you look at causation in how it's described in grammars. And then, so I looked at 200 grammars, and where I found some kind of semantic descriptions of positive constructions. And again, I performed, unfortunately, it doesn't rotate. But these are now different features, semantic features, and so of positives as described in grammars. And then I try to interpret that. So it's really messy, and I find nothing like I find in corpora. And it's like there's really difficult to interpret it as well. So the picture is entirely different. And so, but why? So, of course, I may say that maybe grammars are not as inclusive as corpora. Maybe grammar writers only focus on unsystematic, on kind of salient causative that they know about and want to describe. Maybe something is for dictionary or lexicon and not part of grammar according to the view of, and then in corpora we have everything, so it would be nice. But also I think that's another explanation is also possible, because here I was inspired by really interesting work by Anna Wierzbicka, and she wrote that the Anglo-Saxon culture emphasizes the importance of non-interference, non-position, and negative freedom. So that's what she wrote about. And of course, this can be regarded as negative politeness, as we know from Steve Levinson's work. And the English versions have, the problem is that the English version have very many instances of constructions with interpersonal let. And so this is, for example, let of permission, like I'll let you tag along from Frozen, or let of shared information, like let me know if that's juicy enough for you, let me know, from Black Swan. Let of tolerance, like I'll let you finish by Black Swan, like do whatever you want, and so on. And this may be a reason why the contrast between factitive and permissive causation is so strong in this corpora based, in this MDS based on this subtitle in English. And so there should be some translationese effect. And we don't get this in typological data. So that's, I think, could be a reason. So we now see a very big problem here. It's a challenge. And this is source text biases, and especially if we work with parallel corpora, or basically with all kinds of corpora. So then, of course, corpora do not represent languages. They represent what Michael Ciso calls documents, and the main dimensions are affected by the frequencies of different semantic and pragmatic functions. But it doesn't mean that our semantic map based on corpora is totally wrong, but it's just a facet of what is possible, and it just kind of incomplete probably. And there can be, of course, translationese effects here. So maybe we need to compare this with reference corpora of these languages, and so maybe these translations use this permissive control of events more often than one would normally do in these languages. I think at least in Russian sometimes, like all these expressions, I wouldn't say really use the Latin verb, Russian Latin verb to translate that. There should be paraphrase, but maybe people who translate these subtitles and are kind of influenced by this. Yeah. So these are some caveats, of course. So then we can, of course, classify languages based on aggregate indices. And so here I wanted to show you another thing. It's there are many different quantitative measures like analyticity or syntheticity. There's also or Kolmogorov of complexity, who had dependent order, and so on. So there are really many things you can do. And here I have computed an analyticity index following Greenberg. It's a proportion of function words in a text sample. Yeah, so and then the challenge here is what if we take different text types? Will these index be stable or not? So for Grimm, you thought they should be stable. It doesn't matter. But Benedictson-Schally, for example, from Leuven, he says no, English. He works on English, and he says no, English is not homogeneous. Right. These are analyticity indices based on three text types: news, Wikipedia translations, and text and subtitles. Again, and so for English, Arabic, Finnish, Indonesian, Russian, Turkish, Vietnamese. And what one can see is that, of course, the subtitles have higher analyticity as a rule than the other two genres. And even interesting that actually, well, English has the highest analyticity as one would expect, but Russian has very high analyticity based on subtitles. So that's also very interesting. So one should also take that into account. This is a challenge. Okay, I'll skip that. Yes, I guess. I hope I have time to quickly show you how to test cross-linguistic generalizations. Here, I've been working recently on different cues to subject and object, or who did what to whom. And so different languages have different cues. Some use the case, an agreement, some use rigid word order, some use semantics, and of course, many other things are also important, pragmatic factors, morphological, and others. And we also know that rigid word order is inversely correlated with argument marking. So it was idea already present, expressed by Sapir, and also supported by artificial language learning experiments. Then also another universal from Greenberg is that if the verb follows the nominal subject and nominal object, then the language almost always has a case system. So that's another correlation. And also that verb final languages tend to be semantically tighter than verb medial languages. And I'll explain what semantic tightness means. So then I took first 30 corpora, 1 million each, from the Leipzig corpora collection. They were annotated with UT5. And so then first I computed word order rigidity, where the subject and object kind of used in randomly, basically, of course not randomly because there are pragmatic factors behind this usually, but whether we can just predict or not whether subject is always used first in these languages at least. And the rigidity would be the 1 minus entropy here. So rigid, it's like English, and shown here in the English, also French, Indonesian, and Danish, Swedish. It's where there's really low entropy. Its subject is usually first. And Lithuanian, Hungarian, Tamil, Latin, Czech, and Estonian, actually, they have some variability, but. And so the second one is case marking. I just computed mutual information of case marking and subject-object roles. So how much case form helps you distinguish between subject and object, basically. And here it's very similar, but in the reverse order. Lithuanian, Hungarian, Latvian, Estonian come first, and then we have at the bottom languages without any case marking, like Danish, Dutch, English, Indonesian, Swedish, Vietnamese. And as for loose and tight semantics, that's loose languages have kind of allow anything to be subject or object. So there's a loose association between what kind of role it is and what kind of semantics these nouns, let's say, have. And in tight languages, for example, some languages don't allow inanimate subjects, something like this. Or of course, it's a Klein, so it's a continuum. So languages can be more loose, or more tight, or tighter, and so on. And so then, but of course, just personalizing semantics is very difficult. And time-consuming, so I decided to use instead mutual information of lexemes and grammatical roles, so such that there's tight language have high association between lexemes and grammatical roles, subject and object, and loose languages have low mutual information or weak association. Just skip that. And so that's now Hindi, Korean, Russian, Hungarian, Japanese have high mutual information. That means they have many, strong preference for specific nouns to be either subject or object. And Indonesian, English, Spanish, surprisingly Turkish, something is wrong there. I think I would expect Turkish to be on the tighter side, but I don't know, maybe some lemmatization issues here. So, but these are kind of classified as relatively loose languages. And finally, I computed the proportions of verbs between subject and object, which is straightforward. With Indonesian, English, French, they have always a verb in the middle, and Japanese, Korean, Tamil, Persian, Turkish, Hindi, they are verb final. And so then one can compute correlations between them, these cues. And so here we have negative correlation between rigid word order and case marking. Yeah, so it's languages either like Estonian with more flexibility or like English, although of course it's a matter of degree. And languages with case marking have usually tight semantics, but they have tend to have there's negative correlation with verb medial order, and also tight languages are usually have also usually verb final. So the generalizations that were in the literature are kind of supported by corpus data, and that's nice. One can also perform causal inference. But what I wanted to show you is one can, of course, 30 languages are not enough. And typologists don't take this very seriously. So although Greenberg started with 30 languages and discovered his famous generalizations, then I decided to get more data. And so I took Comrie's Waltz chapter, and about whether the form of subject and object is the same or not, and transformed it, simplified it a little bit. So whether basically, yes, so neutral alignment was coded as the same, and all others like ergative and accusative languages were coded as different. But I also looked at, because there wasn't really much data, I looked at parallel Bible corpus, and I looked for Jesus and as transitive subject to object. So I used the Latin version because it was kind of easy. That you have case marking. So the Vulgata version, and I try to find the most likely subject and object equivalents in these languages, in this parallel Bible corpus, and also to take into account positions. And then I actually had some data for almost 1,400 languages. So whether the form for Jesus was the same for subject and object. And this was really nice. I don't know how that's, of course, it's not perfect. At least I know that something is wrong with Algonquin languages because they have some other markers there that are not exactly about subject and object. And so then I made some correction, but this is some original data. And so then this is forms of Jesus where the same in these translations. So it's then orange forms, orange dots, and the blue ones are if they have different translations. So that's kind of really nice of 30 languages. Although of course there's a trade-off between scale and amount of detail and accuracy. Then as for word order, I took some data from Robert Osling's Multilingual Alignment in New Testament Translations, very nice work. And so I computed based on that entropy of subject and object and proportion of verb final clauses. So this map shows entropy of subject and object order in New Testament. And so if it's the darker it is, the higher entropy, the more variability there is. So it's also kind of more or less plausible. And these are the proportions of verb final clauses in New Testament, then with darker points representing higher probability of verb final clauses. So you see, and there are many white dots here. I hope you can see them a little bit. So, and then there is, we can now compute correlations, but I was also interested in the role of social linguistic variables. And these are, first of all, the number of speakers, because there are some hypotheses about the number of speakers and how it matters. And so there's some ideas that you have many people, and especially many L2 speakers and adult learners, then language tends to be less complex. And so then finally I got some data for these or actually 800 languages I had in total with all these variables. And then I did some regression analysis, and I found a very strong effect of verb finalness on the probability of case marking. That was really, really strong, and no matter how many languages I take. And but as for the effect of population size, then actually, first of all, you remember there was a strong correlation between word order and case marking, and based on 30 languages. But here, actually, I observe it only if the number of speakers is large. That's an interesting interaction here. And And also, I found that large population increases the chances of case only if word order is flexible. So there are some complex interactions here. So that's one can, of course, discuss that. Maybe we can have some time or during the coffee break. Yes, okay. You can see at least that one can also perform, because I'm running out of time, that's one can perform causal analysis based on this data. And so this is our ongoing work with Ade Ribeiro, where we can actually make a causal graph based on, and there's some indication that population size matters for case and for the position of the verb. And also there's a word order entropy might affect case and the position of the verb as well. So this is a really cutting-edge research that Adele is developing. And to sum up, I hope that I should manage to show you that Cooper allowed us to study probabilistic graded phenomena and with greater precision. So we can do many new things and compute new measures like semantic tightness and or different indices like analyticity index. And of course, Cooper also make us aware of problematic cases and make us think how to express our hypothesis in a quantifiable way. But of course, there's a lot of work. There's, of course, a lot of bias towards major and Indo-European languages, and there's many theoretical practical issues of cross-linguistic comparability, and we should keep in mind we're dealing with dialects and not with languages per se. But at the same time, I want to finish with this question: what is language? Does this exist? Language at large or something else? So how can we make generalizations about language? So thank you so much. Sorry.